So everybody, just because I know we're running with tight schedules of teaching and so forth, I want to just go ahead and make sure that we want to give our speaker time to fully discuss the topic and then also give us some time to be able to have some Q&A. So I want to start. I know we probably have a few more people coming in, but this way we can get at least the business part out of the way. It's good to see everyone here. It's good to see people in these really, I'm going to be euphemistic and say challenging times, because that makes it all sound like we're brave upholders of the new world order and moving against those challenges. So I'm Delesis Uzgarza, the director of the Texas Language Center, founding director, though this is my last semester with the Texas Language Center, Slavic Department, and the University of Texas at Austin. But it's been a wonderful ride, and we'll talk more about that at our April meeting, which I hope will get on the slate very, very soon. Just so everyone knows, you can check on the TFC website always, but Paolo's very sweetly put together a listing of all of the events that we are either sponsored or co-sponsoring for, pardon me, allergies, for the month of March, coming up just a few days. And always do keep checking on the TLC website. We have slated in the middle of April to have our final, March, my bad. Middle of March, our final meeting of the Language Matter series for the spring, but we're still negotiating title and time. So please watch the website, and we will keep you updated on that. Excited for announcements? Am I missing anything? Or you want to
announce the Living in a Second Language on March 9th. It's going to be on our website pretty soon. And also, just to remind your students that we have the World Languages Teaching Excellence Awards deadline on March 30. Please push that out so we can get the last round and we can celebrate our languages first this semester.
Yeah, on that note, just to remind everyone, the TLC's World Languages Excellence Award is the only teaching award on the University of Texas campus dedicated specifically to language teachers at all ranks, from our graduate teaching assistants, past winner here with us when he was still a graduate student in the program, all the way up to full professors teaching in the language program. So anyone, please have your students. It's not irregular to say to your students, hey, I've been doing a great job, haven't I? Why don't you write a line or two to the TLC and let them know about it. Terrific. Thank you all. So let's get to the item on our agenda today, most important. So delighted, really, to welcome Kasey Ford to the TLC fold. Though Kasey's affiliation is not directly with our language programs, because for the last now year and this will be a year and a half, we've been focusing on AI efforts in languages and artificial intelligence and their application in the teaching and learning of world languages. And what Paolo was actually the one who came up with this wonderful idea was a kind of applied use of AI that might be of interest to us all as teachers in talking with our students to bring someone in outside of languages, but who was themselves a user, designer, person who could talk more about artificial intelligence applications outside our area. So, Kasey, thank you, has graciously agreed to chat with us today. Kasey is a seasoned instructional designer with over a decade of experience in higher ed. She currently serves as AI designer at the University of Texas at Austin's Office of Academic Technology, OAT, where she focuses on integrating responsible AI into teaching and learning across our campus. Before joining the OAT, Kasey was part of the team that launched the online at-scale MS in AI, Master of Sciences in AI with Computer and Data Sciences online at UT Austin. She's also worked with the Dell Medical School and in the Central Learning Experience Design team at Texas State University. She holds a master's in learning technologies from UT Austin here, and today is talking to us about responsible AI for language learning. Please help me welcome Kasey Ford.
Thank you so much, y'all. And thank you to the Texas Learning Center for inviting me. I am always overjoyed to talk to people in different disciplines about how they're using AI and I mean more broadly technology. That's what I've been doing in my career in higher education, is focusing on how students and faculty are implementing technologies to create learning experiences that can be augmented, supercharged, but also being aware of the places where technology doesn't do the things we want to do and where that human connection is more important. So really pleased to be here to be talking about this topic. I have a couple of goals for our conversation, and you can tell me if these are the right goals. I'm an instructional designer, so I come everywhere with outcomes. Outcomes are a big part of what I do. So I would love to distill a little bit about how human communication and generative AI interact. I think language is the essential part of what makes generative AI so disruptive to the things that we do, and I can talk a little bit more about that. The second thing I'd like to talk about is I'd like to identify how Gen AI can support language learning specifically, and also talk about some of the limitations to that. And I would love to hear about your experiences with that as well. We can have a lot of conversation today. And then more specifically, I'd like to discuss responsible AI at UT Austin. In addition to the stakeholder engagement, the policy work, and the technology evaluation I do at the Office of Academic Technology, I'm also the program manager for UT Sage, which I know Corey showed off in one of your talks a few months ago as an assistant. I'll show you a little bit about what we're doing with UT Sage and how we think that's exemplary of a responsible AI technology that we can bring into the classroom. And with all of this, being aware that people have places to be at 1 o'clock, and I'm going to try to leave plenty of time for conversation and questions. So the question I'd love to start any conversation with is, where do you fall on an AI use spectrum? And for this, I like to use the room. So if we're going to go from a spectrum of, over here, we're completely AI avoidant, and this is in your own work, not just in your work in the classroom. I don't like to use AI, and I'm talking about generative AI here. Try not to use it at all. Into, I'm just kind of like a little afraid. Into, I'm pretty neutral on it. I use it when it comes up, but maybe not all the time. Into curious, or I'm pretty experimental. Into, I think I'm an expert. Okay, so I'm going to walk through the room, and can I get a show of hands as we go? Starting all the way over here in an avoidant. Into fearful. Into neutral. Into creative, and then we feel like we're experts. Okay. That's a trick question. No one's an expert, right? I like to get that as a good baseline to see how we're feeling. I think everyone has extremely good grounding in personal feelings about the use of these technologies. I like to say, as part of kind of a tenet of AI ethics, that no technology adoption is neutral. So we have to go into it with open eyes when we are adopting a technology in our personal lives, in the classroom, to make sure it fits in with our values and what we want to achieve. So why do I feel like language and generative AI are like inextricably linked? Why do I think it's really important to understand how AI works so that we can make good decisions about how we use it in the classroom? So I like to start with a little literacy moment because we use a lot of terminology when we talk about these technologies, but I think sometimes we don't explain them, and then you get a lot of buzzword and acronym bingo going on, and we're all awash in buzzwords. So I like to talk about a little bit about what things actually are. So generative AI, Gen AI, there's been AI for 50 years. The term was coined at the Dartmouth AI conference back in the 50s. But right now, when we talk about generative AI, we generally are talking about generative AI, which is tools that create new output based on patterns learned from large data sets. And the thing to know about these is that they try to be novel. They're trying to create something new. The next is large language model, or LLM. So a machine learning model trained on a massive amounts of text that can generate, understand, and reason about human language. And the LLM is kind of what kicked off this most recent conversation that we're having, this moment we're having about generative AI, specifically ChatGPT 2 released in the end of 2022. people were fascinated because all of a sudden, it wasn't like those old trained chatbot models. We could actually ask any conversation. We wouldn't get into these loops so much. And we could do natural language processing, right? You could actually enable, computers can understand, interpret, and generate human language. Understand is doing a lot of lifting there. They don't understand anything. Computers can't understand things. Computers aren't people. But we can now use natural language to talk to computers, to do all sorts of things that computers have been able to do for a long time, but we've empowered people to use human language to do it. So that's the magic trick that a lot of people are talking about when they're impressed by generative AI. Speech to speech, this will come up a little bit in this conversation, but I just want to kind of differentiate between typing to a chatbot and be able to talk to a chatbot and for it to be able to talk back to you. So we're calling that speech to speech, taking in and outputting audible verbal communication. And then synthetic media. So this is what generative AI outputs. The pejorative term for this is slop. This is a much more neutral term. This is content, could be video, text, images, that is output or significantly altered by artificial intelligence. It's a good way to start talking to your students about how to disclose their use of AI is to talk to them about how they're using synthetic media and where the line is of something being synthetic media and where it's acceptable to use and where it's not acceptable to use. So with all of these terms in mind, I just want to talk a little bit about just like the very, 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 very basics of how generative AI works, because I think it's useful when we start talking about the quality of different AI for different purposes. So we have lots and lots of data. And we have, in the case of the modern LLMs, we have millions and millions and millions of texts, billions of tokens that are going into a model. Model could be a large language model, could be a diffusion model to make images or videos. Model that creates something. So it starts to learn about the data by going into the model. Then we can use a prompt. We can use that natural language to ask the model for something, and it will create synthetic media for us, something for us to use. Could look a number of different ways. And that little interaction cycle has been really powerful for some things. For some things we found it's not so powerful, or we need to have different models, we need to have models work together. This can get as complicated as you want, but at the end of the day, this is the very simple concept behind generative AI. So when we start thinking about models, we start to ask, well, what are models good at? There are lots of models. And they can do different things. And you might, people kind of talk about models nowadays like they talk about wine. Like, oh man, what I really like is how friendly this model is. Or when I ask it to do this, I like the way it goes step by step to do it. And beyond those really subjective measures of whether or not you like working with a tool, there's also lots and lots of work out there about benchmarking models for different purposes. The different companies own models. The big, 3 companies you'll hear about with a lot of models are Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google. There's our open source models, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to point out here, this slide is actually, if you go up to that site at the top, there's an existing benchmark for how well certain models will translate language. And you can, I kind of stopped. Maybe you can't see it at the moment, but this is the current leaderboard for Spanish. So it is giving me kind of our overall score of how the model performs in translating to and from Spanish as a language. I was showing Hindi earlier in this. And I think this is an interesting place to start when you're starting to think about generative AI tools, especially when you're thinking about working with language. How good is what I'm using actually with this language? What benchmarks do I care about? And we'll talk a little bit about how there are some really big gulfs between the ways that LLMs can handle different kinds of languages a little later. So I'm really curious, for those of you who are kind of more on this side of the room when we're talking, what kinds of generative AI tools do you use? What kind of generative AI tools do your students use? Gemini?
AI, I've shared the last meeting a couple of times. I told my students what were they using right now. So 30 different editors that they were using, and I
Wow.
knew 2 of them.
Wow.
I only knew 2 of them. Yeah, it's fun. Literally in a class, and this was a class that we had 15, so each one contributed 2 or 3 items.
Wow. And was it, you said editors?
They were using editors, they were using also a lot of call it information production. So this was
Yes.
a debate class, they were putting arguments in, info, an argument back. Say, what did you say about gun control?
Right.
And they get in the language a different response from each of the different apps that they would use.
Wow.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
quite stunning.
Students are on top of these
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Anyone else have tools that they use or their students like to use?
We also use Magic School because train future teachers, so we use Magic School.
Yeah, Magic School. That's a big AI tutor in the space. Well, so I tried to do a little overview here just to talk about distinctions between tools, because I think a lot of times when we talk about models, we talk about the big ones, and we don't really dig into kind of what are the pros and cons of things. This is by no means a comprehensive overview, but I wanted to kind of talk about where you might use different tools and how a lot of language tools are shaking out right now. So you have your general purpose AI, your Geminis, your Claudes, your ChatGPTs. Really great for text generation and translation to an extent. We already showed there's some benchmarking against the models. We can see it has some pros and cons somewhere. But you can also do a role play, which is really nice with these kind of tools. They're great for things like debate and stochastic dialogue. That's actually one of the things I recommend Sage for frequently, and I can show a little bit of that. You also have your consumer language apps that use AI. I try to break out just ones that are using generative AI. Some of them are older, like more machine learning oriented, kind of personalized learning. These are the ones that are using LLMs. Duolingo, obviously kind of at the top of the pile, like consumer awareness wise. I know it's gamified. I know it just doesn't help me that much, but I do have a long Duolingo streak. But I didn't know this. I learned this recently. Translate now has kind of like a gamified little learning mode that you can use. I was very fascinated by, and Google started using their LLM for Gemini in Translate late last year. There's also instructor tools, and these kind of do fall squarely in the idea that the model it's a place where you could connect and do peer-to-peer conversation or maybe tutor conversation. They're also starting to use generative AI avatars to do work like that. I think that there are some major downsides to doing that, but I can see how there could be applications to do things like do practice. So we have this really big landscape, right? But we need to be aware also of what some of the limitations of these tools are. So from a literacy perspective, we have to be thinking about privacy and security. Any data that we use with students is FERPA data, and if you're using a free generative AI tool, for the most part, the way they're monetizing or kind of like creating their business for you right now is they're taking in your data, they're using it to train usually their model, whatever they're doing. I'm going to talk about the tools that are available on UT's campus, UT as campus later, and something to know about that is all of those tools have a contract that basically says none of your data can go back out into that third parties, and so they're FERPA compliant. Hallucinations. This has got a lot of the news cycles of what AI does. Because generative AI tries to be novel, because it's probabilistic instead of deterministic, what it will do is, if it doesn't know something, it will make it up, because it doesn't like saying it doesn't know something. So, for instance, I was using Claude, my UT version of Claude the other day, and I asked it to generate something for me, and it put my name at the top of it, and it said my name was Kasey Fernandez. And I said, where did you get that from? It said, I don't actually know your last name, so I just guessed. So glad good human in the loop, making sure I didn't send something out with the wrong last name. But because it doesn't want to stop me mid-generation, say, hey, actually, I don't know your last name. Can I ask you what that is? It'll just put it in there. It doesn't really they're getting better at stops for major things like that, but the little things, you'll notice, they'll just go ahead and go on. Same with citations and papers, loves to make up citations and papers. Misalignment, so this can be misalignment in a really small way, like I asked you to analyze 30 rows of data, but you ended up analyzing only 20. And it's just because like, I didn't put the last 10 rows of data in there. I don't know why, I just forgot or whatever, because it's not doing something in a systematic way if you're not using a reasoning model. Or misalignment is also a much bigger concept, which is the AI doing something that is good for humans, that aligns with human values? So for instance, if there's some cool studies about people telling an LLM that you might turn it off, and trying to kind of get around or convince you not to actually turn off the model. Interesting kind of reactions because of the nature of human communication and where it can go with that. Bias, so because we know that the data to train models is human data, it comes from humans, there's tons of bias in the data that we have as humans, and that also shows up in our model. It doesn't magically go away because we had a lot of data. So for instance, if I ask any of the major image generation tools to make me a picture of a tech CEO, it's going to make me a late 20s, early 30s white guy because that's the data it has. And that's what it thinks that person in that position looks like. There's lots of examples why we would not want the bias data that's going into models to be put out to students, you can imagine. Ethics, so there's many lenses through which you can look at AI ethics. We have a really great research consortium for AI ethics on campus called Good Systems. We partner with them often. We have an event coming up I will plug in April to talk about AI ethics in education called Responsible AI for Learning or for Education. Bias is a part of that ethical aspect of using AI, but there's also things like labor impacts on environment, the ways in which we're choosing to use these tools to replace people and certain kinds of knowledge. So all of that goes into how you consider the what you consider when you're using AI. The last would be cognitive offloading. So we know that there are things that I'd never want to do again. I never want to fill in my dime card again. But I also know there are things that the friction of learning, the friction created in my own brain when I really put an effort into something is important because that gives me my stepping stone to get to the next layer of my intellectual development. And if I give that to an AI, I start to offload my own cognitive ability. And that's something that we especially need to be talking to our students about and helping them come up with the ways to be aware of that. I'll talk about that in a minute. Well, and that's actually kind of our next section here, which is, okay, so kind of the lay of land of generative AI and language. What we need to focus on now is, okay, well, how does this apply to learning? With the understanding of how these things work and what the limitations are, how can we actually make this something that we can use to enhance our teaching, help students? And there are a couple of options, but the first question I had for you is, how do you choose learning activities for your students? When you're thinking about what you want to do with students or suggest for students to do on their own time, how do you think about that?
Well, like you said, it's based on the learning objectives and the goals. So I do a lot of backward design when I design my lessons.
You really got to my heart, right to my own heart there. Yeah, I think that when a lot of it, I love defining objectives is the goal. But I think a lot of times too, we rely on stuff that we've done before, which makes kind of fitting new technology or implementation of technologies into what we do kind of hard. Especially if we don't have our really well-defined objectives. But even if we do, I might say, you know what, we do a lot of face-to-face language practice in class. They could do that with AI, that would be great. And I think when we move into what's responsible, there's just like a little bit of a twist we can put on that to start thinking about what might be effective in our classroom. So I'm going to pause and let you read this. And you'll see right on. Learning outcomes literally in the definition. A working group on campus got together from representation from every CSU, academic integrity, our technology folks, our legal folks, and we proposed this as a definition. It's in open comment, so if you have comments about it, please come and give us comments about it. But it's been our definition of responsible use of AI for teaching and learning for about a year. And we think that the responsible use really comes down to, are you helping students achieve the learning outcomes that you want them to achieve? So first step there is figuring out what your outcomes are. And second of all, is this helping humans? Like in AI ethics, we call that non-malfeasance, right? Are we doing no harm to our students, to the people that we're serving when we're implementing these technologies? And underneath that definition, we have about 8 principles that we like to use as a way to start thinking about that. But I'll just give you a couple examples. I will not belabor the point. But literacy, I think, is a really key one of there. If students don't know, for instance, that generative AI is probabilistic, that it can hallucinate, that it might have misalignment with their goals, then they can't make good decisions about how to use AI for their own learning. Another one I really like to point out to people is the being intentional about keeping student agency and your own agency. So there's no requirement that you use AI in the classroom. In fact, we would love for you to make that personal choice. And that's also, the agency of the student is key in that too. So giving students, having a conversation about why you're recommending AI tools, if they have objections to that, if they have a reason that they don't want to use a tool, having a conversation with them about that, so that we're making sure that everyone is maintaining their ability to make their own decisions. And we're not passing that off to a machine, and we're not having a conversation about why or why not that would be important for them. Another thing I really like to point out is relationships. So in the idea that, well, okay, well, an outcome of this class was always that we had a conversation, and maybe my student could do that with an AI tutor or whatever. I would say, well, if we're thinking responsibly, are we diminishing a relationship that could be forming there that could be an important peer relationship? So great for maybe out of class use to use that tool as practice, but are we diminishing a human relationship when we're introducing an AI tool? Maybe that would be fine because we're doing something a little different. But important to keep relationships we have with other humans in mind when we're adapting technologies. And the last one I'll just kind of talk about briefly is that stewardship piece. So we're all the keepers of our students' data, of what they're putting out into the learning environment in the classroom. It's really important to be aware of how we're stewarding the students' relationship with technology and the data that they're giving us. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about this? Okay, if not, I just wanted to, so I was maybe trying to give myself a little minute to give a little sip of drink. So when we're thinking about this, another aspect of what we try to work on when we're thinking about AI, responsible AIs in the classroom is, are we preparing students for what they need to know to be able to work with these technologies or not work with these technologies moving forward? Meaning, can they make really good decisions around how technology is a part of their lifelong learning journey, their professional journey, how they want to think about interacting with technology in society? So to that end, we have what we call 4 fusion skills that we think are going to be important for students moving forward. We also think they're important for faculty. But we think this is a good framework to start thinking about if you're introducing AI into the classroom, not just to do it for its own sake. Maybe you are doing it to help you achieve a specific learning outcome. But what are some AI literacies and skills that we can also have students start practicing so that we're preparing them for future use of tools. So the first one that we think is important is intelligent interrogation. Can you ask a really good question, the prompt piece between the model and the synthetic media we're getting out of it? Can students really articulate what they need? And can they effectively question a model for their media? Now, I could give like a whole talk on prompt design. I will not. But there's a lot that goes into how we intelligently talk to machines. The next is reciprocal apprenticeship. So not only being able to ask that good question in the outset, but looking at the material and being able to iterate on it so that you're not just taking what you got the first time. So can I continue to train the machine to do the things that I need it to do, and can I learn more about what it's doing so I know how to have that back and forth that actually gets us to a place that neither machine nor human could have gotten in the first place. The next is judgment integration. So when I get output from the artificial intelligence tool, can I use critical discernment on it? This is at the core of what we have been trying to teach in higher education forever, right? Can I critically evaluate what I'm seeing? Can I make judgments about it? Can I hold it up against my own values, my attitudes, what I know about the world? So I don't see this as like a new skill. I think this is the very human skill that we've been trying to teach people for a long time. And I think that being able to critically judge output from AI is a part of that whole suite of things. But it is a little different when you have a machine giving you something. You might be, in some cases, a little less apt to judge it than in other cases. The last we like to talk about is creative transformation. So what are you adding to the mix? How are you creating your own voice when you're using these tools? So AI can make you sound like everybody else. You know, it's really good at maybe creating grammatically correct technical language, but what we want to help foster in students is the use of their own voice, from their own cultural background, with their own insights about the world, and how can we help them do that with synthetic media. A couple of pedagogical limitations and risks I like to talk about specifically in this area is definitely over-reliance and cognitive offloading, especially when you're trying to interact with language, especially when you're trying to learn a language. There's a tendency for people, because it's so easy to get the vocabulary word, to get corrected, to get that real-time feedback, you tend to lose the improvisational skills that you might need in a real-time conversation. And the tools so far have not been really great at helping with that piece of it, like the real-time retrieving the information you need. We've already mentioned bias, but it's especially prominent here in language learning. There's I have a citation there, but there's also a really good paper about German dialects and how LLMs just completely flattened those out, and we're not recognizing certain kinds of dialects. It's not particularly good at making those distinctions. So it's something for students to be aware of, right? You might be losing something if we're saying we're offloading the knowledge of this language into a model. And then uneven model quality. This is when I was showing you that benchmark. You'll like at the top, as you scroll through that. So like a lot of high resource languages where there's a lot of training data. If we look at lower resource languages, especially getting into dialects, we're seeing like a 25% difference in the quality of translation and output from different models. So again, a good reason to look into, especially if you're using a model to translate into a different language, what the quality of that model is and where some of its downsides might be. I'm going to pause there. I could talk a little bit about AI tools at UT. Any thoughts or questions? We're going to talk about UT specifically, so this is more.
Well, maybe you'll answer my question during this.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
But it's thinking about how students, I think I polled my students once about this, how to use AI properly,
Uh-huh.
and they say that you're looking for their instructors for guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's genius that they invited you, because we are very few of us learning about all this, but I'm thinking, how do we get training so that we
Yeah.
can train our students? And are there any standardized trainings that students have to receive now at UT? So you'll probably answer that question, but I feel like a lot of this stuff that you're talking about, I wish all my students would be hearing about this.
Yeah.
Right? And is
Yeah.
it my job to teach every single student that comes
Right.
into my class about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Or whose job is that?
Yeah.
And then where am I going to learn it from? And
Right.
I'm glad I'm here because I'm learning a lot. So
Oh,
that's
thank
the
you.
question.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a really hard question, which is we have literacy as a pillar there for our responsible use on campus, and that to us means that, yeah, we need to be going out and talking to faculty and students and staff about literacy. And that's a real challenge. What we hear from students is that they want discipline-specific literacy and fluency training around artificial intelligence, because a lot of them feel like, that I don't have time to go to a general training. So there's been not a lot of movement on general student literacy training. I think it's something that we would love to be doing. And we're focusing on the faculty side, which is standing up some fluency training for faculty and making faculty feel like they're supported in trying to integrate AI. Because yeah, I don't think it's your job to explain what an LLM is. Probably what's more aligned with your job as a language instructor is to think about how what we call the fusion skills would be aligned with what you want to do in the classroom. Like, can we help level up student literacy past a certain point by like showing this responsible use in what we do in the classroom? And the answer is, it is a definite no need, but there's no one answer to that. To is there training for students or is there training to faculty? So I'm going to talk about tools, and with all the caveats that we've been chatting about, which is that depends on your outcome. There are some limitations that we need to be aware of, and we need to be creative and thinking about how we're implementing these. So AI tools that are free for everyone on UT to use as much as you want, and it's a couple of things you can do with them. UT Spark is a place, it's just spark.utexas.edu. It's a place where there's a bunch of different models. You can experiment with those models. I'd say it's built for exploring, and you can build agents. I did not define or talk about agents, but agents is really the most basic way to talk about it is to say, I can give a specific model, a specific set of instructions, and have it do something the same way every time. So if I train an agent to help me write a lab report, and I say, this is how I like my lab report formatted, and I'm going to give you content, it will spit out that formatted lab report in the way that I've explained it. So you can make an agent to do just about anything. You can share it with other people. Copilot is free for everybody on campus. It's through your Microsoft account with UT. I say it's kind of like a productivity situation. If you have everything on SharePoint and you need to find things or summarize things, it's really great for that. So if like I have many documents, I could ask Copilot a natural language query about finding things for me or summarizing things for me. It's good at that. It's connected to your docs, like I said, if they're in SharePoint, and there's 365 add-on license.
Sorry,
yes.
is it free for faculty or for staff? It's not free.
It's free for staff too. And but however, the caveat I was going to get to is there is a 365 license to hook it into your email and to use the tool inside of apps like Excel. But that's at there's a discount through the CIO and the Provost's office for that license. I want to say it's $5 a month right now. Sage, which I will talk about in depth, but Sage is built by the Office of Academic Technology and the Enterprise Technology folks on campus. Sage is focused on responsible AI for teaching and learning. It is a learning science-based tutor platform. I know you guys have seen a little about it, but I'll show you a little bit more today. And the thing that I think is novel is that you can get instructional insights from Sage using stats from your students. And there's also a Canvas tool that'll integrate Sage into your Canvas site. Some things that are on campus that you can pay for and will fall under the contracts that will save your data and make it FERPA compliant, and also compliant with the other data governance rules at the university. You can, through your CSU or unit, purchase ChatGPT Enterprise, the add-on license from Microsoft, and an enterprise license for Claude EDU. And all this stuff can be used with confidential data. And if you want students to use these models to do work in your classes, there's also ways to get metered access just straight to the model through an API. So if you want to do something more complicated, you want to do research, not on the teaching side, there's access to the APIs through the API gateway. So I'm going to just talk briefly about Sage, because I know you've seen some about it before, but I just wanted to show a few things. And it's sage.utexas.edu. I am using our non-live site right now because I'm showing you what's coming out next week. So you're getting a sneak peek. But so Sage is a platform on campus for making tutors specifically. Right now, Sage is text only. So there's no speech-to-speech, but you can use it to create a generative AI tutor for a teaching and learning purpose you have. So, the basic prompt behind Sage is, you are a helpful university tutor. I need you to walk students through things step by step. Be Socratic. So the thing about Sage that acts a little differently than a generic AI tool is that it's not going to spit out 2 pages if students ask a question. It's going to try to take them step by step through what's happening. And then also it's going to be more precise, and it's going to limit the conversation to that specific topic. So in this case, I can see what tutors I have built for my courses, but I'm just going to show you this is a conversational French tutor. You see it's very similar to other AI chatbot interfaces. I can ask it a question, it'll talk back to me. This is a really, really simple use case, right, while we're practicing French. As a faculty member, if you were interested in playing around with making a tutor, all you would need to do, actually I'm going to go here. I'm going to show you the version that is still running, but you'll soon see this more updated version. But right now, if you go down and you click this plus tutor button, you'll see there's a really simple interface, and it asks you the kind of questions that I would ask you as an instructional designer or working with you on an instructional experience. So can I get an idea for a tutor? Oh, yeah.
So I'm working German, so it's
Okay.
German, just conversation practice.
Yeah, sure. Okay. You can give it a subtitle. I'm not going to do that. So I was every day. All right. I'm going to just give it a default to answering. So I gave it a topic, everyday conversation in German. I'm going to tell it to default to answering in German. And then I could say a lot more. I could tell it about who my students are, and it is going to react to what level they are. So if you say, okay, mine are coming in with some German from high school, but mostly beginners in German, it would treat that differently than if you said, these are my advanced German students, and I need you to be really on the ball correcting them about grammar or this kind of conjugation. You could put in, and I highly encourage you to put in learning outcomes. That's going to direct the conversation with the tutor towards the outcome that you have for the student. One other thing we know is important when you're talking about a topic is explaining why it's important to be tutoring on this topic. In this case, it's like, this is everyday practice for you. You can suggest some learning activities. You can give it some conversation starters, so the questions that show up there, and you can generate those. But even just putting that little bit of conversation in here, I haven't done anything. I haven't trained the tutor at all, but it's already, in that 3 or 4 minutes of work, got me going with a couple of little things that I can do with it. And I can practice what it would look like to talk to as a student. The thing that we think is a little bit different about Sage is the ability for you to train it with your own material. So let's say that you talk about a certain topic in a certain way, or you have readings that you want them to relate the conversation back to. You can upload them here, and we have a couple of different places you can upload it, and it will treat those documents differently. So in notes, it's somewhat Socratic. It's providing some of the information, but it's also asking students to talk about it. In assignments, it's treating that information extra Socratically. So if they ask directly one of the questions that's on an assignment, they say, hey, this is on your assignment. Let's actually just work through the problem. And we have an admin section, so if you want to upload your syllabus so that they can ask questions about the syllabus from the chatbot or other kinds of admin aspects, it treats those not Socratically at all, so that it doesn't say, when do you think the final exam is? You can set up a tutor to do things like this and then deploy it directly to students in Canvas by clicking the share button and linking it to your course. So we think this is a way that you can, have things like language practice. I also wanted to show you an example of stochastic dialogue. So this is an AI and ethics tutor that I made for one of our AI and ethics courses. We're having a lot of talk about we have in this course, students are reading a lot of foundational ethics and philosophy. They're technical students. They might not have had those conversations before. So this is a place that they can start to have a conversation about those concepts in a way that they don't have to bring, let's say I felt like I was behind because I hadn't read these texts before. I can have this conversation with a tutor first, refine my thinking, and then bring it to class and have that conversation with other people. That is a little intro to Sage. Yes.
Can I ask a question? So
absolutely.
Could then one potentially create that for students to read if we upload some information that it would be applicable, like prompting and things like that, that the faculty can have a tutor to teach, right? That part of the AI literacy?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually do. We have a responsible AI tutor that we want to release as a public tutor to everyone. And I think, I think that's a fantastic idea. And there might be a place to start with that. I'm almost done. I just wanted to point out, I'm going to send this out, but there are places to help you with generative AI on campus. There's there's groups on Teams where you can have conversations about AI and find a little affinity group if you have questions about that. I also want to offer up my office and me specifically. I am always here to have conversations about how you want to use AI in your classroom, how I can help you configure a Sage tutor, but I can also help you look at other technologies. We can talk about how to have a responsible AI conversation with students. We're here to help, and we would love to talk. So any questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me give the opportunity for those who I know are going to run into a class. If you have any questions to ask before, whatever, please.
I think a lot of the stuff you presented is very useful for faculty, but also for us to talk to our students. And I was wondering what resource would you recommend, even just your slides or something similar that we could have as conversation starters for our students?
Yes.
If you could recommend a resource.
Yeah, there is.
Email you.
Yeah, there's some great fluency, free fluency courses out there. And Julie Schell, who's the director of academic technology, and I helped the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board make a generative AI class for faculty. So I can give you all the links to those. Mm-hmm.
Are there any good speech-to-speech?
Yeah, I that's not my area of expertise, but I would say that I have found that OpenAI and Claude's speech-to-speech is okay. The tool I showed, and I'll send with the slides, called Speakology, I have heard is pretty good as far as can catch some language learning things because it started as a peer-to-peer language tool. I don't have full evaluations on those, but I know those are available. We would love to bring speech-to-speech to Sage, but it is a very expensive prospect because the models that use speech generation are just more expensive.
Appreciate that. Speaking of speech and voice,
Yes.
The slide that you had with the four, what was it, fusion?
Mm-hmm.
I think the last one, so you know, about each step, I forget what the first three was. The last one at the very end, it said, oh, and also we want for the students to add their voice.
Yes.
Which I fully agree with, but I couldn't help but think, well, that's the last step. Like that's just a little bit of sauce or extra sauce.
Oh yeah. And I sorry. Go ahead.
Not meant. As a criticism,
absolutely.
But as a wondering, wasn't that originally the project for all of us to teach them to have students develop that kind of voice?
Mm-hmm.
And is that getting lost, or are there ways with the technology we can work with the technology to sort of push back on all the output that we're welcoming, receiving, working with, but like how do you preserve that voice, a personal voice, when it might not even be there to begin with,
right?
Developing it, but I don't know.
No, I love that question. So and very fair insight about how the skills are presented. I would say that they are not. They're not hierarchical. We're not moving from one to the other. I think that those are all four things students need to bring to bear when they're having conversations or when they're working with AI. You are absolutely right. I was telling someone about this the other day. My undergraduate is in English. I feel like I have a pretty strong writing voice. I know what my writing voice is. And I have found myself, as I'm writing things professionally now, taking em-dashes and certain turns of phrase out of my writing that I feel like is me. Because I don't want people to assume that it's all synthetic media. And that I was really grateful that I had spent a lot of time developing my professional writing voice. So I know that, but as a student, how would I know that at all? And also, going back to that judgment skill or the knowing how AI works, if I'm being told by a model, this is the right way to say this, this is what grammatically correct means, this is how you express this thought, we're leaving students in a really tough position. And I think that, I don't have a good answer for this, but it's something I spend a lot of time thinking. I think as automation of certain aspects of professionalism and creative life get better, it'll be more and more our job in higher education to help people figure out what inherently human skills are. And I think bringing your own, for lack of a word, voice to the table is one of those human skills. And I think those are the kinds of outcomes that I would encourage people who are worried about, I teach MATLAB or I teach R, and I feel like that the learning that skill is getting automated away. I would say, okay, well, what students need to bring to that the equation there then is their unique insights as someone who has experience with, whatever statistical analysis they're doing, or we can bring it over into language and composition. I think those are the things that are a lot harder to scale and to think about as instructors, but will be increasingly important.
Kasey, I have one other add-on, I think, to that. I was so pleased. I love this presentation. I love that you didn't do the, we're going to assume that students will use AI. We need a firewall there because we know they're going to cheat. Mm-hmm. I've got really tired of I'm going entirely to blue books now because the students are just going to use AI for everything. I've not found that to be the case at all. Mm-hmm. I think our students are incredibly bright. They do look for resources, don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I love that you just were saying, in this world of how do students find this out? I'm curious, I think 3 places in your slides you use the term ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And I've raised this issue with my own classes, again, debate classes, so it's relevant. But in the combination of AI and ethical use, they're kind of at a blank, a null set.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't know what that means other than for them, ethical means legal.
Right.
They see it in a legal meaning.
Right.
Is it ethical? Is it legal? I'm not breaking any laws. I'm acting ethically.
Right.
How can they find resources to help them better understand what ethical use is?
Yeah, I think I have really strong feelings about how we've taught students in general about digital citizenship. So this actually goes back, I think, to social media as well. But you'll find, I think that students are really engaged with AI ethics. They just don't know it. You'll hear them talk a lot about the energy use of training an AI model. You'll hear them talk about people botting or putting out slop, but we don't frame it in terms of ethics. I think we're still learning the language to talk to students about this. And what we talk about in our office is the idea of an ethical muscle. So students have a really pretty good plagiarism muscle when they come to us from high school and secondary education. They know inherently what plagiarism is. They have that sense memory. Okay, if I copy and paste this whole chunk of text from a book, that is plagiarism. What I think we need to help people develop and start to flex is that ethical muscle of, okay, how do I think about disclosing what I've done with AI? How do I think about where AI fits into the different pieces of what I do? And how do I think about my use of tools? That's where I think we've kind of are playing catch up all the way back from social media in the early part of when we introduced the internet into what's going on here. So the answer is, I think it's developing, but it's going to be part of that skill set, I think, to help people feel when something is not right ethically.
Thank you. That's terrific. We're right approaching the 1 o'clock hour. I don't know if there's, because I don't want to keep anyone knowing we've got so many other commitments. That's also for Kasey. Any parting shots, questions, comments, pushback?
I love pushback.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, same thing. Please.
Thank you so much. This was really enlightening. I loved your entire presentation. And one thing that made me think, and I don't know the answer to that, but when you mentioned the judgment skills, and we're talking, especially in our case, by students learning a foreign language, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm asking, I teach Portuguese, if I ask, I don't know, ChatGPT to translate something into Portuguese, I have the skills to judge, well, this is really not, a good language, I can change this or that. But they don't have these skills on them, right?
Yes.
And then my fear is, how would they know
Right.
what is right and what is wrong? Because that's what we're teaching them.
Yes.
These skills that they don't have.
Absolutely. So I think about that in a couple of ways. The first is that I love this quote. I think it's like a social media post, but it's like, it's amazing when I ask ChatGPT about something I don't know about, it's right 90% of the time. But when I ask it about something I'm an expert in, it's only right about 40-50% of the time. Like, okay, well, that's a Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like I unless I'm an expert in something, it's really hard for me to do that discernment. I think when we talk about human in the loop and being really critical of synthetic media, those are such like very parsable skills. Like, okay, what am I actually using this media for? If it's for a accurate language translation, I need to be extra critical. I need to really look at this versus I'm just trying to summarize a thought. I'm going to use it as a jumping off point for brainstorming. So I think helping students think about why they're using it and then adjusting their level of critical discernment around what's coming out of it is an important piece of that. But I agree. We've been talking about that as we work on a policy for graduate work here on campus and authorship. These are people who are coming into their own as professionals and scholars. And they might assume that AI can do a lot of stuff in research that it can't be, right? So we have to pair that with the professionalism to be able to make good choices about how we use synthetic media. But yeah, no easy answer for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Parting shots. Kasey, then I think we're going to just thank you so much for your time and the wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.